All right, good afternoon, South Mississippi. Meteorologist Taylor Graham here, giving you a quick update on the forecast. Plus, we're going to be looking at what's going on in the tropics in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. If you've spent any amount of time outside today, you know just how hot it is. And spoiler alert, it's going to stay really hot and really humid over the next several days. I know that's what we expect for this time of the year, but if you're going to be working outside day in, day out, just a heads up that your body may be under some of that stress thanks to all of that heat. So hot and humid, that's the main story for the short term. Down the road, we will be watching for some tropical development, possibly in the Bahamas and the Atlantic. No immediate threats to the Gulf Coast at this time, but for the time being, it is just plain old hot and humid. So we'll go ahead and take a look at what's going on in the forecast. First things first, we are still under that heat advisory today. That lasts until 7 o'clock this evening. Temperatures are in the mid-90s for the most part this afternoon. Heat index at times is going to be close to 110, and it seems like we're seeing some of those temperatures right now, mainly in the mid-90s, even for those of us on the coast. Even seeing some upper 90s, it looks like 97, the hot spot near Pascagoula and Moss Point. A little cooler, if you want to say cooler, over in Bay St. Louis right now, coming in at 88, but the high humidity is not helping us out at all. It's beautiful to look at on our tower cameras today. We've got some sunshine out there, but of course that's been heating us up. And while the heat advisory calls for the heat index as high as 110, looks like Moss Point, we have a heat index right now of 114. Dew points in the upper 70s, low 80s. Doesn't really get much more humid than that, even here along the Gulf Coast. So again, if you're going to be outside for much time at all today and probably for tomorrow, this is approaching dangerous levels of heat with the heat index that high. It just makes it much more difficult for your body to cool down whenever it's this humid and also this hot. The sweat is not going to be evaporating nearly as efficiently as when we would have dry air in place. So that's what makes the humidity a little bit more dangerous down here with it being so high. It's just overall just much more difficult for our bodies to cool down. You know, we're not really the only ones dealing with the extreme heat today. In fact, excessive heat warnings are in effect, it looks like, throughout parts of Memphis and up into the Mississippi Delta. Also dealing with some very high humidity there. Heat advisories extended up into the northern plains, it looks like, even into parts of South Dakota. We have the heat advisory in effect for parts of Nebraska, even seeing those excessive heat warnings up there as well. And the reason why this heat is so expansive across the U.S. is because we have a big ridge of high pressure that's been building in across the southern plains and also the southeast. Now, for us in particular, and along the Gulf Coast, the humidity is sky high, but of course, the high heat a problem for a good portion of the lower 48, it looks like. So anytime we get high pressure, that generally means sinking air. So as that air moves closer to the surface, it heats up. Plus, with sinking air, we don't see as much rain, nor do we see as much cloud cover. So with more sunshine, naturally, that's keeping us very hot. And with us being so close to the Gulf, of course, all that moisture in the air is making it feel very, very muggy outside. So that's going to be the same setup over the next several days. It looks like we better get used to it if we can for the time being. Looking at satellite and radar, just a few clouds here or there, not really seeing much in the way of rain. And while rain chances are slim, I'm not going to completely rule out maybe 1 or 2 stray showers today. Many of us are going to stay completely dry. Most of the rain, it looks like, is going to be farther away from that ridge, more so to our east into parts of Alabama and the Florida Panhandle. It's kind of a copy and paste forecast. Tomorrow morning, starting off in the 70s. As we get into the afternoon, we're going to be right back into the mid-90s for the most part. And just like today, I'm not ruling out maybe 1 or 2 stray showers or thunderstorms. Most of us are going to stay rain-free tomorrow. Again, maybe 1 or 2 thunderstorms, but chances are you're not going to see much rain going into Wednesday. And the same can be said for Thursday and Friday. We're really just stuck in this summertime pattern for quite some time. We'll keep that chance at about 20 to 30% over the next few days. So while I can't completely rule out a little bit of rainfall, most of us are going to end up staying rain-free over the next few days. That is some good news if you have outdoor plans, but of course that high heat is still going to be causing issues for some of us. And it may not be until early next week that our temperatures drop off just a little bit more, but not by much. we're looking at highs getting a little bit closer to normal or average for this time of the year in the low 90s. At least for today, tomorrow, into Thursday, we are expecting temperatures at least in the mid 90s, if not the upper 90s north of I-10. But at least this week, the tropics are not too much of a concern for us. However, we are going to be watching out for some possible tropical development over the next few days. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about what's going on in the tropics. Overall, not a whole lot at this time, but there is a big tropical wave that we are watching in the Atlantic. And while I say it's big, there's really not much to look at on satellite today. It's just generally a wide area of low pressure in the Atlantic. It's to the east of the Lesser Antilles at this point. It's where we have that orange X. That's where we have that tropical wave that we're watching, general area of low pressure. But as we can see on satellite, not much going on around it. We don't really see too many showers and thunderstorms associated with this system. And if the system does develop, it's going to be a slow development over the next several days. And in fact, over the next 2 days, we are not expecting any development out of this system. It may not be until the end of this week that it starts to get its act together a little bit more. It's got a few obstacles that it's battling at this point. One of the main ones being some dry air, where we have some of that orange color on water vapor. That's a lot of that dry air. Tropical systems don't like that. They need a lot of moisture to work with, but for the time being, we're really not seeing too much of that around the Lesser Antilles. So it's battling some of that dry air. We also are seeing some Saharan dust still over the open Atlantic. Not only is that air dry, but it's also dusty. So again, it's battling some obstacles at this point. And even if it does start to develop a little bit more, once it gets closer to some of those Caribbean islands, it's going to be battling some of that land interaction. That could hinder some of its development as well. So a lot of uncertainty at this time with how much it's going to develop. And then on the other hand, there's a lot of uncertainty with where exactly this system may travel over the next few days. Now we have this big area of high pressure in the Atlantic, what we call the Bermuda High, which generally sits over Bermuda almost year round, to be honest. This is going to be helping to steer the system a little bit farther westward over the next few days. Big questions as to where exactly it's going to go. If the system becomes a little bit more organized and if the ridge is a bit weaker, that could help the system move a little bit closer up the east coast. If we see this wave is going to be a bit weaker and if the ridge of high pressure is a bit stronger, that could help to steer the system more so into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, forecast models at this time generally kind of all over the place, and that's what we expect. To be honest, forecast models right now not very helpful because the system hasn't even formed. The European model has consistently shown the system moving up the east coast. The GFS or American model hints that this may be moving into the Gulf of Mexico as a weaker tropical wave. But again, take any forecast models you see on social media with a huge grain of salt. I've even avoided showing them because, like I said, to be honest, they're really just not very helpful at this point because the system just hasn't even developed. So all in all, to wrap up what's going on in the tropics with this Atlantic wave, it's just too early at this time to really predict its exact track and how intense it may get. Development of the system over the next few days is going to be pretty slow. Like I said, it's battling some dry, dusty air. If it starts to get its act together a little bit more over the Caribbean islands, that's going to be hindering its development. Now, typically speaking, tropical activity picks up in August and September, so while we're only watching one wave right now, chances are over the next month, 2 months, we are going to be tracking a lot more heading into the tropics. I know the past few weeks in general, the tropics have been fairly quiet. That's likely going to change into August and September. Now, if the system does become a tropical storm at some point, the next name on the list is Debbie. But we have a ways to go before it may even become a tropical system. Like I keep saying, this is going to be a slowly developing system, it looks like, over the next week or so. As for today, at the end of July, we typically don't see too much tropical activity, but once we get into August and September, history tells us we see more of those tropical depressions and tropical storms. And in fact, roughly about 85% of tropical systems generally form after August 15th. So we do have a ways to go before hurricane season is over. And not only in August and September do we have tropical activity, even the beginning of October, we can be dealing with some tropical storms. Even throughout the month of October, history tells us that we may have tropical systems. I'm sure a lot of us remember back in 2020, we had Hurricane Zeta, and that was near the end of October, just a couple of days before Halloween. So can't let our guards down. This tropical wave that we were watching is just an indication that the tropics starting to wake up a little bit more right on cue, and that's exactly what we expect. But again, it's going to be a while before we see anything develop, if at all. For the time being around here, we just have a lot of heat and a lot of humidity up ahead in the forecast. Temperatures still going to be a little bit above average today, tomorrow, into Thursday. You may be lucky enough to see a few showers and thunderstorms cool you down a little bit, but overall rain chance is still looking very slim, especially today and tomorrow. Maybe there's a little more hope for some more rain by the end of the weekend and early next week, but that's still several days out, so we can fine-tune the details in that forecast. But at least over the next 4 to 5 days, it's just plain old hot. It's plain old humid around here, typically what we expect. But just emphasizing, if you're going to be spending much time outside day in, day out, that is going to be adding some stress to your body. I know it sounds obvious, but these heat illnesses can sneak up on you pretty quickly, so we don't want anyone to get caught off guard with all of the heat building in over the next few days. As for the tropics, it's very much a wait-and-see situation. Don't want anyone to panic at this point, that's for sure. We have several days to watch this tropical wave. Still a lot of unknowns where exactly it's going to go, how intense it may get. But this is a good reminder that we will start to see more tropical activity over the next month or so. So just double checking to make sure that we all have our hurricane plans ready to go just in case something does spin up over the next couple of months as we enter the peak of hurricane season. But for the time being, it's just going to be hot, humid. Hopefully we can all stay cool. Hopefully your AC is working well, because you will definitely need it over the next several days. So with that, I am going to be signing off. You can catch me at WLOX on channel 13 at 4 o'clock this afternoon for another forecast update. We'll have the latest information there. Until then, stay cool and stay hydrated.